Do you like RPG series like Yakuza, Metaphor, and Persona? Well, stick around because SEGA shared a bunch of interesting information on all those series recently, including an updated sales figure for Metaphor. They leaked some really interesting information about their RPGs that I don't think they wanted to get out. Plus, they told us when we can expect to play Persona 4 Revival. So let's just dive right into this. All right, first of all, they updated sales figures for Metaphor, Refantasio, and it has sold over 2 million copies since it released last year. Now, I know some people see that number and think, oh, that's not that impressive. Only 2 million copies. I mean, there was so much buzz. It reviewed so well. It got all these Game of the Year awards. Well, here's the thing to keep in mind. Despite how visually stunning Metaphor is, that game has a relatively small budget compared to things like Grand Theft Auto or even Final Fantasy or some of the bigger RPG series. It's selling 2 million copies. I imagine that it probably made like $80 to $100 million because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was also on Game Pass. So I know they got a lot of Game Pass money from Xbox. So I think they're very happy with making that kind of money. And the budget is not as big as something like a Final Fantasy or, you know, those bigger RPG series. So I think they're pretty happy with this information or this data, and they made a healthy profit on it. And keep in mind, this is Atlas, so we're probably gonna get Metaphor. The rumor is it's gonna be called Metaphor Retold. So, you know, they're gonna do a re-release of this and it's probably gonna sell an extra couple million copies. So all in all, I'm sure they're very happy with how this performed. Now, this next bit of information comes from SEGA's financial report. Now, I know this sounds really boring, but there's actually some really interesting information that they share in this stuff. So basically what they do is every year they have an investor meeting and they share all their updated sales data for a lot of their big franchises. And normally they don't share like minuscule sales data on different franchises. I know Nintendo does that and Capcom does that, but Sega and Atlas do not. But I believe they included this and they forgot to omit it or black it out. So we have a lot of really interesting sales data that Sega has leaked. So I want to go down all of it. I think some of these numbers might surprise you. So the first one is that Persona 5 Royal to date has sold 7.25 million copies. And you know, the really weird thing is within the last fiscal year, so from April 2024 to March 2025, it sold almost 2 million copies. Think about how far after the fact we are with Persona 5 Royal, and it's still selling the most it ever has. So I don't know if it got a boost from being on PC and Switch. I imagine that's probably what happened, and then getting ported to the new consoles. So it getting a big boost like that, I know helps a lot, but that is surprising. Now, this number does not include OG Persona 5, which I think has sold like 10 million copies or somewhere around there. So between the two versions, Persona 5 has almost sold 20 million copies. And for all of you guys wondering, oh, why does Atlas do these re-releases? This is why. When you can sell an extra 7+ million copies, why would you not do it? All right, the next one is for Yakuza Like a Dragon. So this was the first game where they shifted the combat system to more of an action brawler, or from an action brawler to more of a turn-based combat system, and it sold 2.8 million copies. Now, again, you look at those numbers and think that's not that impressive considering how long ago that game came out. And in your mind, you're like, I feel like Yakuza is bigger than it is, but honestly, 3 million copies is pretty good. And this is a studio, RGG, where they have their pipeline down. Like, the budgets on these games are probably a lot smaller than you might think. So for 3 million copies for a game like that, I think that's actually really good. I'm sure they're very happy with those numbers. And while we're on the topic of Yakuza, let's look at Infinite Wealth. So Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth sold 1.6 million copies sold. And that seems a little bit low. I know it sold like about 1 million copies around release. And so after it's probably sold, you know, another couple 100,000 copies, which I guess is pretty good. Again, you have to keep in mind that a lot of these games from the Yakuza franchise, they reuse a lot of assets. They can flip these games around pretty quick. So, you know, 2 million copies, I think that's pretty good. They're probably happy with that. I'm sure they sold pretty well. And then Like a Dragon Gaiden, that sold 960,000 copies. Now that seems a little low, but again, it's like a side game spinoff. I'm not sure if people really took that seriously or they thought it was like a mainline must-play game. So for it only selling 960,000 copies, that's probably not all that surprising. All right, let's dig into some SMT and Persona sales. So Shin Megami Tensei 5 plus The Vengeance Remaster has sold 2.1 million copies. Now, I feel like SMT has always been a pretty niche franchise relative to Persona, especially in recent years. So for them to sell 2.1 million copies, again, I feel like that's probably pretty good. Again, there's not a ton of voice acting or big production values in these games, and I'm pretty sure they probably reuse a lot of assets from Persona, so they share assets, especially with the demons. So for 2.1 million, I think they're probably happy with that. I really don't know, but 2 million copies, that's nothing to sneeze at. And then Persona 3 Reload has sold over 2 million copies, and I saw a lot of people online going, yes, SMT beat Persona, but you know, whatever. We're all playing on the same team. It's all Sega, it's all Alice, it's all JRPGs. So 2 million copies for Persona 3 Reload. I think they're very happy with those numbers. Again, it seems like so Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor both sold, you know, over 2 million copies. So that's great. Again, I think for Persona 3 or Reload, they're not having to come up with everything from scratch. So I feel like the pre-production period was not as long. They could just be like, okay, we know what we're making because we've made it already, and we just got to update the assets and, you know, maybe spice some things up. So 2 million copies, I'm sure they're very happy with that. So all that to say, I think those are good numbers. You know, Sega is in a very good position with their RPGs. Obviously, Persona is the cash cow. They're going to keep milking that thing until it runs dry, which looks like it's not going to run dry anytime soon. If Persona 5 Royal sold almost 2 million copies in the last year, like that's crazy. People love that game, man. People love that game. All right, and speaking of Persona, when can we expect to play Persona 4 Revival? Well, in my video where I was covering a lot of the announcements from the summer, I believe I said that we probably shouldn't expect this till 2027. And I was right. So in their report, they said that they're planning on launching this in or after fiscal year 2027. So for people that don't understand that mumbo jumbo jargon, that means from April 2026 until March 2027. That's fiscal year 2027. So we could get Persona 4 Revival maybe late next year. I doubt it, or else they probably would have stuck a year on it. So my guess is we're probably going to get it early 2027. That's my guess. You know, Persona 3 Reload released early 2024. So that gives them 3 years to turn this thing around. I'm sure they're very happy to do that. And if they can, you know, reuse a lot of assets from Persona 3 Reload, sell another 2 million copies. Although to be honest, this is maybe a little biased, but I think Persona 4 is a much more popular game than Persona 3. So I expect Persona 4 Revival to sell even better. I imagine in the first year it comes out, I could easily see it selling well over 2 million, maybe 3 to 4 million copies. We'll see. We have to see what they do with it, what they add, what they change, how people receive it. But I think that's pretty fair expectation. I'm curious what you guys think. Were some of those sales numbers surprising to you? To me, they were. I was so surprised to see how well Persona 5 is still selling this far after the fact. And some of the other numbers, I was like, oh, is that good? Metaphor, only 2 million, but I think that's pretty good. So drop it all down below. And while Persona 4 Revival was a really exciting announcement from all the summer showcases this year, there were actually a bunch of other JRPG announcements that you might have missed. And if you want to check out all the announcements, watch this video next.